building, which is what Colonel Fallon is going to talk about. We gotta get out of this place. Nothing's the last thing we ever do. All right, welcome, Colonel Fallon. Welcome to the Marines Memorial Club.
Well, thank you, Mike.
And
It's an honor to be here.
And how long have you been a member? You've been a member almost as long as you served in the Marines.
Almost. I'm about 25, 26.
Thank you, runs it fast.
Yeah.
So a big question, having seen the video about the book, who's going to play you in the movie?
Well, it won't be Spolter.
It won't be Spolter, okay. Think Mel Gibson would be suitable for it?
Sure.
That'd be acceptable?
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you.
Great. You know, Colonel, your background, you're all Marine. You were preordained to be in the Marine Corps. Tell us about your family and why it was so obvious that you became a career Marine.
Well, my dad was a 38-year Marine, so I didn't quite catch up to him. But he went to the Naval Academy in 3 years, not because he was smart, because World War II was going on, and they needed ensigns and second lieutenants. And the whole class graduated a year early. So he's WW2, Korea, Vietnam.
And you were born at Pendleton?
Yes, sir. 3 hospitals back in the old wooden hospital up by Lake O'Neill. And when I came home, he had government quarters, which was a big deal. Camp Del Mar, right down by the beach, and he had half of Quonset.
Hey,
First
Marine Corps,
lieutenant, yeah.
You know, we really lay it on people really nicely, don't we? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good deal. So, moved every 2 years, and I didn't think there was a decision. I just joined, and as they say, the rest is history.
And so you go on to the basic school, you graduate, and your first assignment in the Marine Corps is recon.
Well,
Or you were trained, your first training after the basic school.
guys at the top of the grunt class competed for Ranger School and for Recon Replacement School. What a name, Recon Replacement School. That means the guy in front of you got killed. What type of name is that? So yeah, I got selected, went through Recon Replacement School with my record book. I arrived in Da Nang like everybody else, go through that process. And they say, 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines. And I said, okay. Alpha Company, 5th Recon's assigned to them, I'm still going to take it. I check in with the warrant officer at 3rd Battalion, 26 Marines rear. He says, you're going to Lima Company. And I said, no, I'm supposed to go to Recon. He says, Lieutenant, you got a lot to learn. You got 10 minutes to get on the next helo.
You're going, I'm telling you, you're going.
You're going to Lima Company. When I got there, I got off the helo, dust cleared, and I asked, the controller was on the ground, PRC 25 on his back. I said, where's the skipper? And he said, up at the top of the hill, overlooking the valley. So I walked up there. First Lieutenant John Rabb, great company commander. He said, welcome to Lima Company. You're the 2nd officer. I said, what's my job? He says, whatever you want to be, but 10 minutes, next helo's picking you up, and you're going up the Haivon Pass.
Which is a very critical mountaintop overlooking Da Nang and separating Da Nang from Hue City and the others. But you know what's interesting? Let's set the context now. This is 1969. And it was very interesting in the book. Every chapter starts with a little bit of a historical setup, where we are in the war. So why don't you give us a little context of where we were in Vietnam in 69 when you were going into recon?
Well, if you recall, the country was split. And in those days,
The U.S. was split.
our country was split. And we had the Hawks on one side and the Doves on the other side. And then President Nixon won against McGovern, saying he would bring an honorable peace. And so when he got in, his challenge at the political level was, how do you bring an honorable peace when he promised his citizens they were getting out? And so there was a plan that was in the public, and then there was a plan that was secret, which of course was a secret bombing. And he's going to bomb Hanoi back to the peace table, which was going on in Paris.
And what was the situation for the North Vietnamese forces at the time? This is post-Tet, after the Tet Offensive. What was their situation in 1969, where you were south of Da Nang?
They were in a rebuild and regroup stage. Tet 68, every district, every province capital got attacked, and all of them were defeated. Everybody knows the big attack in Way City. It took a few more weeks to win that one. But at the end of the day, out of 90 attacks, they were decimated for manpower. And so they went into a rebuild stage in the first part of 69, and that's put together a draft of 100 North Vietnamese citizens, young, that were drafted, and walk them down the trail.
So they come down the trail, they enter into Vietnam west of Da Nang, and they're coming into the area that you were assigned at Hill 119, and where 1st Recon was assigned to patrol all those Charlie Ridge, Quezon Mountains, all this area leading into the critical fire base or air base at Da Nang.
That's true. The hill was selected because it was about halfway between the Quezon Mountains and Goonoi Island. And the NVA do everything by how far you can walk in a day or a night through that terrain. And then they hide in the daytime if they don't control the area. So they controlled Goonoi Island, always had, and it was one night's walk from the Quezon Mountains to Goonoi. It was one night's walk to Da Nang. So General Ben, who had the 2nd NVA Division, his job, assigned by the Central Committee, was to take Da Nang. And his staging area for taking Da Nang was Goonoi Island. So 119 set abreast of the only 2 trails to get to Goonoi Island. So it was a bobbing cork.
So that was the main thoroughfare for the NVA to rebuild their forces, bring them into a position where they could attack Da Nang, which, as you mentioned in the book, was the busiest airport in the world in 1969.
1969, every 30 seconds, twin runways, 11,000 feet then, bringing in the logistics and the soldiers, airmen and Marines. Da Nang logistically supported 4 divisions. So all of I Corps, and I Corps is the military name for the 5 northern provinces. And the 4 divisions were commanded by the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force, a Marine 3-star. And those divisions up on the DMZ in 69 were the 3rd Marine Division, out of Fubai, with 101st, the Screaming Eagles. The defense of Da Nang belonged to the 1st Marine Division.
And part of that defense, you talk about the trace, this imaginary line, which is the distance the rockets, their large rockets, could be fired from and hit Da Nang. And so, as I understand, one of your key missions was to make sure that enemy soldiers didn't get inside that line where they could launch rockets into Da Nang.
The Da Nang trace was dictated by the distance of 122. 122 could be launched, and the infantry in a belt around 270 degrees by battalions circled Da Nang Bay, deep water port, and airfield. It pretty much tied down. Hill 119 became an economy of force when they wanted to run Operation Taylor Common and go west. So they said, Recon, you take care of 119, and through supporting arms, interdict the NVA. So the 1st Division is on the defensive as their first mission to defend the logistics for all 4 divisions.
We'll talk about the main recon, the traditional mission of snoop and poop operations, going behind enemy lines, finding out where they were, but it was strange when you think about that you had a fire base. You know, a lot of the larger units would be at Hill 55, 65, they would man those places. And I was surprised to hear that a recon team was manning a hill, a stationary place. But you seem to have had more activity from that stationary place of observing enemy and engaging them than any other patrolling.
Yeah, we led the division, and number 2 was Hill 425 to our south on the shoulder of the Quaisans, manned by recon. We manned 119 for 600 days. They knew we were there. And it's funny, the Marines thought it was good duty going up there.
They were not on patrol, so they weren't carrying packs. They were in one place. They were getting to sleep a little bit. Yeah, it was pretty good duty.
And our job was to call supporting arms, which means artillery, naval gunfire, and air, which we called every day and every night. In 600 days, confirmed body on the ground, 1,089, 600 days. That's not the ones that they drug off afterwards. That's
So you were engaged in the enemy quite regularly from that perch that you had overlooking this main thoroughfare where they may try to infiltrate into Da Nang. But of course, there was no Club Med. The guys were doing, it was interesting, they got 5 gallons of water when they came in, and that's all they had for the 2 weeks.
you get on the helo with a case of C's, 5 gallons.
Sea rations.
Sea rations. Your 5 gallons of water, and then your H harness. And Marines tend to collect stuff. So ammunition and Claymore mines, how do you know? Any gunny is going to bring, when he comes up, 30 or 40 Claymore mines. There were hundreds of Claymore mines on the hill, which was a great part for defense. Halfway through, the Marines of recon don't raid a water buffalo. A water buffalo could be a beast of burden to a South Vietnamese, but it's the nickname for 250-gallon tank of water on an axle with 2 wheels. So 2 energetic Lance Corporals, McNeese and McNary, go down to Da Nang International Airport on the Air Force side, midnight, requisition, and get a blue U.S. Air Force water buffalo, bring it back, paint it green in the motor pool First Recon, take it to LZ-401, and on the first resupply bird, CH-53, fly it out to 119. And as you're flying in, the wet paint is peeling off. This is half green, half blue. The water buffaloes get changed out once a month. And so once you had one, you were in the logistics resupply chain. Where the blue one went, nobody knows. But after that, for the next 300 days, we actually had a water buffalo, which means we could wash our face once in a while.
Safe to assume those Lance Corporals made corporal pretty quickly thereafter?
Absolutely.
But so tell me what you were doing. What was your secret weapon that you had up there for observing this movement of enemy troops?
Well, it's actually a great story on how technology is inserted. The Office of Naval Research, which we still have today, was funded for a Marine Speedy Fielding Project, and they integrated 3 existing technologies and 1 new technology. They took a pair of ship's binoculars, which are 200-power binoculars, big, huge 400-pound binoculars, and a night observation device, which is a starlight scope that picks up ambient starlight and magnifies it. So a NOD, a night observation device, is a starlight scope on steroids. And then RCA had the first laser rangefinder, classified secret at the time, and they had this big black box, and you would hit it, and it would send out the laser beam and come back digitally, tell you how many meters it was. So the artillery unit, the 11th Marines, brought their survey platoon up and surveyed where the integrated observation device, IOD, Marines love acronyms, from ONR, Office of Naval Research, and said, let's see how it would do.
So now with this device, how far could you see out?
The daytime ship's binoculars, easy 30 kilometers.
30 kilometers.
Easy in good weather. The NOD was 4 kilometers, and what it changed was it changed the game because the NVA had 2 trails around the hill, and they were used to walking at night at distances that they thought we knew. And as soon as that was employed, on good nights, we can now see 4 kilometers. Now, if you have the IOD registered by the artillery survey, and each gun in Anwa Fire Support Base is registered to the gun, there's no more, like you did as an aerial observer, adjust fire. You call them because you're shooting a polar plot.
And you're right on target.
I would call and I would say, I want a battery 3, fire for effect.
So,
That's 18 rounds within 5 meters of accuracy.
because the marking rounds would give the enemy time to disperse.
That was the old way.
Yeah.
And the new way with the IOD was, so the Marine Corps got 10, 6 went to the 1st Division, 4 went to the Americal Division, the 4th Division of Fremeth, just below us. 4 of the 6 went to 1st Recon, and the first month, 40% of division kills came from 2 IODs.
Now, you talk about the tactics and the daily operations as a game. It was a game of cat and mouse between you and the enemy. And there were patterns that were developed. And then you'd have to have counter patterns to that. So what was an average day like in that area? And also, set the context of that area. It had been a lush farm area, which was heavily populated by farmers, that had been evacuated because it was a very critical area. It became kind of a no fires, a free fire zone. So anything that was walking in there at certain parts of the day was a target.
Yes, sir. Ganoy Island is an island between 2 rivers, Song Tu Bong and the Su Ke. One enters the sea at Hoi An, one goes in, is one of the 2 rivers of Da Nang Bay. It's 3 rice crops a year. That had been evacuated of all South Vietnamese in the Strategic Hamlet Program, and they moved all the villagers close to Route 1 where they could protect them. But the villagers were allowed to go farm their family plot during the daytime. The NVA taxed each hamlet and each village, and in the NVA in production season, took off their green uniform and put on black pajamas and went to Ganoy Island because they had to harvest rice to take them through the next offensive period to go on the offense as they lived underground. So the South Vietnamese farmer paid tax to the South Vietnamese government, usually in poundage of rice, tax to the NVA. They wore black PJs. The NVA farmers wore black PJs. So the young corporal sitting on the hill looking through the device during the daytime, the big eyes we called it, 200 power, Ganoy Island started 1,200 meters from us. You could throw almost a grenade downhill. And then 7 kilometers further up was the other river. You could see farmers that were 19-year-old, high and tight, in black PJs.
By day.
Do you shoot on it? He's got a hoe.
So that dynamic, because we affectionately call that, or you affectionately call that area Indian country.
Totally.
It was Wild West. Anything moving in that area was very suspect. So you have to deal with this dynamic that someone's in there during the day,
Farming. Yes.
farming, supposed to leave at night, but you're not sure who is back in there during daylight.
At night, you could fire on anybody. That was the rule of engagement. During the daytime, the rule of engagement, you'd have positive ID that he was enemy. So carrying a rifle, free game. Wearing an NVA pack. So NVAs had a type of pack. Army's had a rucksack. Us Marines had leftover Korean War packs. I won't go there. You know how that is. You know that.
Rub you raw.
So you're making a judgment call on the target you see on whether you identify him as enemy. If you do, then you call him in on the radio and you get guessed or second guessed depending on who you are going up the chain of command. So there's a timeline difference between when you see a person and when you might actually get a fire mission.
Yeah, and us aerial observers, we had to go through another level to get clearance that none of your troops were in the area, so it was safe to call it a mission. So all these levels that you had to go through once you had the sighting, it was frustrating.
It was frustrating for all the observers, and since the hill was observed every day by Viet Cong infrastructure, older people, job was to observe the hill. And they knew our habits better than we knew our habits, and we rotated every 2 weeks. So in the 600 days, there were 24 different hill commanders, but the lady watching the hill, the one-armed woman,
She knew it very well.
she lived it her whole life. She had one arm because during the Viet Minh era, when she was fighting the French, she lost her arm. She held a position in the South Vietnamese government as a village elder and a district chief. She held a position in VC infrastructure. That's the infrastructure that enforces their campaign and rules, meaning she could order an execution or do it herself. It was her area. She knew every one of the villagers and all the families. And we came in every 2 weeks. Some of the hill commanders did repeat times and got a little more savvy to try to pick up what the NVA were doing. Something you have to remember, the NVA soldier from the north, 17, 18, 19-year-old, he doesn't know where he's going. He is led down the trail in a draft by an old sergeant major. He is led by a guide into his base area, 116 or 112 around Da Nang. He is led by a guide to To Son village right below the hill, where they need a VC infrastructure that lead him the next night to his attack position. When he gets to the attack position, his ammo is already pre-staged. And he'll sit there and choose to attack on his rules when he has the advantage. The level of planning was unbelievable, but it was exactly opposite of our tooth to tail. We have an infantryman then with 14 Marines and sailors supporting him logistically, or a pilot with 23 then. Today the number's a little higher. They would put their planning and logistics up front, bury the ammo. That's why we kept finding everything buried. And you'd be really happy. We found 200 pounds of rice, 17 rockets, and all this ammo. Okay, they found one cache. They prepared the battlefield and then watched it and would pick when to fight. Usually when a platoon walked into a U-shaped ambush, the company commander is going to react the same way. He's going to send the 2 other platoons to try to save them. And so this might be a complex battalion level ambush that happened in Quai Son Valley or Phu Loc Valley every year by every Marine Rifle Battalion. So in hindsight, it's easy to see this. So it was cat and mouse. It was how we fought, how they fought.
Now, speaking about the cat, as testimony to your effectiveness, they assigned a pretty large cat to try to take that hill.
General Ben got upset, and General Ben, of course, is in charge of Front 4.
The North Vietnamese commander.
North Vietnamese commander. He worked for Giap. Giap's up north, sent it down to Ben, who's a 2-star. Ben's been there 6 years in charge of Front 4, which is basically the 3 middle provinces of I Corps. And he's double-headed 2nd NVA Division. He had 4 sapper battalions, the T-89 Sapper Battalion, to wipe out Hill 119. He just got tired of it.
How often would they probe your lines and even launch an attack?
They would probe every night to try to develop the picture. And a probe could be 1 or 2 sappers would go up and test one of the 6 draws, cut a wire, turn a claymore around on you, set a booby trap outside your wire to catch the wire patrol that good Marines would run every day from the outside to prevent from getting booby trapped into your hill. You had to patrol your area. The planners were always the battalion commander, the operations officer, the recon officer, the political officer, and the chief scout. Gunnery Sergeant Terry Moore, who was in the SOF Hall of Fame now, walked off 119 with the patrol from Delta Company and did contact with this planning cell over on Hill 177, just south of the hill. He captured one, killed two. Unfortunately, the political officer got away. Came back. Through interrogation, we find out they were the sappers. That stopped the T-69 for 6 months. The sapper school was in Song Tay, North Vietnam, 24 kilometers west of Hanoi. You know Song Tay because the French prison was there. It's also the AAA school run by the Russians and the sapper school. So the elite infantry PFC would go to sapper school, get promoted, and then the elite officers would have to go to sapper school, walk down the trail. So Terry Moore and his one patrol put them back 6 months later, but 6 months to the day, August 8th, the T-89th attacked again with wave attacks on 8 August 70.
Well, in addition to what you had to do to survive on Hill 119, the daily survival of recon Marines is a story all unto itself. I mean, your normal mission was to be patrolling. These 5-day patrols with 8 men. If you can envision now this valley surrounded by mountains and jungle, which is the enemy pretty much controlled, and the American forces in the middle. And so your main mission with recon, as I understood it, was to go out and probe those areas in these, 5-day patrols, deep into enemy territory.
The mission, Mike, was in 69, was what we call keyhole. That means you look through a keyhole, see the enemy, write it down, and come back and report it in the mothership. And they would put together a picture, and there's only so many infiltration routes. There's Elephant Valley that comes into Da Nang, the Thong Duc Corridor comes into Da Nang. Those are 2 big valleys, and you watch them, and you build a picture or a mosaic so the division could go on the offense. The grunts, and I was a grunt, really didn't control their destiny. The NBA knew when you were coming at them because grunts generally were noisy, large units, and you hoped you didn't run into an ambush they launched on you, which then you would use asymmetric warfare and beat them with fire support.
But now you're changing the game. You're in their neighborhood, you're back in their area, they don't know you're there, and you're collecting this information on them.
And if you were a good patrol leader, you selected where you went based on your risk envelope, and if you made a mistake, then we called you an area observer and said, any area observer, this is Team Pal Joey. That's Darren's team, by the way.
Swiss, silent, and surrounded.
We need help. And the help came with the cavalry. The OV-10 was the first to arrive. And of course, they went to the Da Nang desk. And if it was a recon team in contact, Da Nang desk had standard orders to divert any package they could get.
I think a lot of, several people here I recognize were here when Darren Walton was speaking about his book. Didi Mao, and was one of the patrol leaders with recon. Here's a little gift that Colonel Fallon has for you. Also seated in the front row is Jerry Spolter, who was also in that company, Delta Company, and leading many of those patrols. And then a double hatter switched and put on a helmet and flew in the OV-10 Bronco, so he was doing it both ways. But the incredible service that these guys did and the risks that they took, every mission, if you read any after-action report, is absolutely terrifying. Because of whether they were going out to snatch a prisoner, whether they were going to try to gather intelligence, they were deep into enemy territory, operating in their backyard.
You know, recon is a triple volunteer when you get there, and then the Marines that don't want to go on patrol, they self-generate a way to get out. And the Marines that are going on patrol, it's high adrenaline and it becomes addictive. So Darren started as a radio operator. Usually the junior man humps the radio, and you have 2 radios. That's because you got to hump all your equipment ammo, plus the PRC-25 and 4 batteries. And he got smart, he volunteered to be the point man. Well, the point man is when you're in enemy country, there's not so many booby traps. And you move at your pace, which is very slow, and you control your own destiny. If you're down around Hill 119, point man's looking for booby traps and it's dangerous. So self-selection into the teams, they enjoyed being there. Most of them extended. The experience level of the staff NCOs and the second, Gunny Moore was on his 3rd tour at the time, was an unbelievable experience.
How do you ever get used to that deprivation of sleep, deprivation of all creature comforts, the misery of trying to coexist in a jungle that doesn't like you, doesn't want you there, and it becomes as much of an enemy as the enemy itself?
Well, Mike, you learn to live with the jungle. And a rookie patrol leader will pick a harbor site that's in a low shallow that's damp or wet, and the team will wake up the next morning and every one of them will have 20 to 80 leeches on them. The team members will make sure that patrol leader doesn't make that mistake again. Next time he'll pick a place that's a little bit drier and higher. So you learn to live with the jungle, but you're right, you have to be one with the jungle, and we would stop, and anybody could stop the team, but especially the point man. Darren would stop the team and get on one knee and just listen for 10 minutes. And you learn the jungle sound, and you learn the jungle smell. And if you heard a lot of crashing in the jungle coming your direction, it meant somebody started that crashing. So it could be deer, or it could be NBA online. You tried to learn to live first with the jungle, so if you were jungle savvy, Darren will tell you, Jerry will tell you, I can smell a Vietnamese, and they can smell me from distance. And that's not being racist.
It's a soap and it's
what you eat.
Yeah,
if you eat fish heads and rice, Nuke Mom, you smell one way. If you eat Big Macs, you smell a different way. So you learn to live with the jungle. You learn to try to deal with your situation, to always dictate your engagement with the enemy. But if you make a mistake, then you're running for high ground, and you're calling an AO through your radio relay. So one thing you learn early is, if you don't have communications, which may be every other day, you go on the low ground to find out something. You don't have comm because the mountains block you. So you go on the low ground to find out if the road's been used and look at the tire tracks, do some sketches. But you got to go back up in high ground, put up a big antenna to get comm back with a radio relay that's sitting in Banah. So one of the other recon radio relays on this big hill in Banah was an old French mountain resort, and the relay was in the lobby of the French hotel. And so what's in the basement?
In reading your book, all those names came back, the names of these patrols, Palo Joey, Grim Reaper, Fig Newton, Prime Cut.
These were the names of teams.
And the reason it was hard for me to kind of read the book, because I never used to sleep every night with something hanging around my neck that had the latest position reports of all those teams. So if they awakened us in the middle of the night to do an extract, we had an idea, the last reference point, where you were.
Many times they would send an AO out if they hadn't heard from you. Standing rule, if they went a whole night and hadn't reported in, next morning, first light, an AO would come out to the map sheet. So the map sheet's 20 kilometers by 20 kilometers, and he would get up at altitude and get on your primary frequency and say, I won't pick on Pal Joey. Delicatessen was my team, because I like to eat. You don't get to pick them.
And sometimes
Where are you?
these guys, Darren and Jerry, when you did call them up on the radio, their situation was so precarious, most times they wouldn't even speak, they would just click the handset. So I would ask the question, get the information, they would give a click on the handset, affirmative or negative, because they were so close to where the enemy was in many cases that they couldn't speak.
Mike was Cowpoke 7, and Cowpoke 7 would come on and say, Delicatessen, if you can hear me, click your handset twice. Click, click. Then he knew you were in a compromised or soon-to-be compromised position, and you didn't want to talk. By the way, the teams didn't talk. You have 5-7 days. It's all hand signals. You want to eat? Not you, you're on security. Every other man eat. You want to take a dump? You take your buddy, and you go out and dig a cat hole so the guy guards. Dealing with the wildlife, deal with the jungle first. The AOs were our lifeline and communication-wise, and for bringing the asymmetric advantage to your two most dangerous times, which was insert and extract, which you were trying to get on the helo.
Yeah, just to make things a little bit more interesting, after you've done your 5-day mission, you got to get a ride home. And of course, you recon guys made that even very interesting. Because in many cases, it meant dropping out a 125-foot ladder on the back of a helicopter or a jungle penetrator to get a line down to these guys that they could hook up and come out.
Of course, that was never the plan. You had a plan going in that you were going to go out of this big 200 meter by 200 meter low grass landing zone, and you would patrol towards it. You would go in a landing zone in the south, never use the same one twice, try to get out of one. You say never, but it happens. In the north, you patrol up there and watch it for a day, and you find out that there's an NBA counter recon team of 20 sitting on it, waiting to put an RPG into a CH-46 helo coming to get you. Or they take fish line and big X's 12 feet off the ground with 4 detonating cores to detonate it on the helo. You'd have to go to another LC. If you couldn't find one and you needed out, you went to what's called a ladder, which is an aluminum ladder. Was what it is. Strapped to the tail ramp of the CH-46. We got more sophisticated and we got a single cargo harness, 250 meters, that you 250 feet that you drop out with D-rings on, and you snap your snap linking with the D-ring, and you become external cargo for the helo. And you hope the pilot had enough power to pull you 180 or 200 feet through triple canopy before he dipped the nose to go forward. Once he started to go forward and you were behind him, you could roll over on your back, and it was an e-ticket ride. It was fun.
What was the feeling? You've been out there for 5 days, survived the jungle, survived the enemy, and now you're flying home, literally flying home, hanging off a ladder, or it was extraction cable. Was there a sense of euphoria?
Absolutely. I mean,
Was it relief or?
Absolutely.
Absolute relief.
It's one, if your adrenaline's going, and it could be a cold extract and you just happen to be under a hot extract. Generally, if the bird's hovering to get you hooked up, you're drawing attention and you start taking. The NBA want to take the helo. They don't want you now. They want the helo. You were just the bait. So they might have known you were there all along. And they're going to be firing mortars and rockets at the helo. But once you're up and flying back, your life's with the pilot, 4 of the best CH-46 squadrons, and one of the best CH-53 squadrons of your life. I mean, Purple Fox's logo was give a shit. And on the back of the bird was a big white logo with a purple fox head with give a shit. And they gave a shit for the guys they helped. And of course, when they came back to Tustin in Orange County, guess what the Marine Corps made them do?
Paint.
logo.
Hate the logo. You know, you single out the helicopter crews that were so essential to your mission and your absolute survival. You also talk a lot in the book about the Navy corpsmen that were with you. Even a small team like this, you were able to rate a Navy corpsman. And did they know what they were signing up for when they were becoming Navy corpsmen? Did they maybe be out there with you guys doing these recon patrols?
I don't think most of them actually understood about recon, but in Navy Corpsman School, they hear about the Marine Corps and how well the Marine Corps puts corpsmen on a pedestal and takes care of them. So if you're a Navy corpsman and you go to a naval hospital with a 3,000 person Balboa, 3,000 person staff, and you're doing bedpans and you're reporting to a Navy nurse.
Out in the field, you're called Doc.
You know you made it in the infantry or in recon after your test period, and you proved yourself to them. When somebody entered a firefight, John McKay would vouch for this, when the skipper, lieutenant, squad leader says, corpsman up, they never hesitate. Wherever they are, they jump up, corpsman up, goes to the wounded Marine, and he takes care of the Marine. Because of that, the Marines love them, shield them, and when it comes time to do the sanitation duty, the corpsmen get to supervise the Marine. Burn the shitters, the supervisor is the corpsman. The Marine at the end of the squad is called a shitbird because he's the guy that was a shitbird for the week. He gets to burn the shitters.
But the Navy corpsman, taking him, he's got this medical training. How much jungle training, how much ground skills did they have, infantry skills did they have? In fact, if you see pictures of Darren's team and Jerry's team and the others, you know, they're loaded with ammo, they're carrying weapons, they're very much involved in that team.
Well, they're triple volunteer too. They get to the grunts, they hear about recon, they volunteer, and they have to go through the Navy process. And recon rated so many corpsmen, we're always short, just like the infantry, always short once you rate. When they got to recon, we put them through recon replacement training, and then we put them through the recon indoctrination program, which was a patrol over on, technically safe, Monkey Mountain. And you took off over Monkey Mountain. But that's where they would learn about the jungle. And then they would be assigned to a team, and the team would put the doc in the middle. He walked between the two radio men, and they took care of him on the first, second, or third patrol. The docs were generally older, smarter, more mature, and if they liked it, they loved it. And then you found docs doing every position, but when somebody was hit, they were doing medicine and saving lives.
Colonel Fallon, I only have one major complaint about your book, and that is it was 55 years too late for me. Because I learned so much. Even though I was over there, I didn't know what I was doing over there most of the time. I didn't know the big picture. I didn't know the strategy, the enemy flow, all these things that you outline in the book. You outline the game, both sides of the game. And I found it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's why we would go over here, or that's why we'd find people here. But it was so insightful. And tell me about the process that you did in writing the book that made it so accurate to what was actually happening. You're not just telling war stories in this book. You have actual accounts of these missions, precise missions.
Each battalion and squadron is required to do a command chronology once a month, and that's at the lieutenant colonel level, what they did the previous month. So they're declassified and on file now at Virginia Tech, who keeps them for the Marine Corps. That gives you an outline. In recon, third force, first recon, after every patrol, you had to go from the LZ to the S2 hut and do a debriefing. And they got typed up and classified, sent up to G2, sent all the way to the SARC up at 3MAF, as they were trying to put together the big picture, because they were also picking where you'd go the next time. After 30 years, those became unclassified. So every veteran will not willingly lie to you, but at the VFW, the American Legion,
A few years in age, it kind of changes the story a little bit, doesn't it?
and the mind usually blends 3, 4, 5 stories into one or confuses an emergency extract. So I interviewed every recon Marine I could find from the battalion between 50 years and 55 years, over 100 of them. Darren, Jerry. And then I printed out every patrol report, and Darren walked point because in the patrol report you have to put the roster that hung in a 3-shot when you were out on patrol. And the roster had your name, your blood number, your rifle number, your position. And so hey Darren, 11 to 15 April, pal Joey, and you were walking point. And he would tell a story, and he thought it was a month earlier, a month later. We'd have a dialogue.
But essentially the story was correct. It was a little foggy on some of the details, but the essence of the story was there.
If you want to learn about life of an individual Marine or recon Marine, Darren's book, D.D. Mao, is his memoir of being on a recon team and his life. That's a good memoir to read. It gives you about the life and his process of becoming a FNG on the team, and the corpsmen were FNGs, versus being a guy on an extension and being a team leader.
On a personal level, I was joking about your book was 55 years too late. How long did it take you to really kind of reconcile what you did over there and realize that you had to share that with other people? It seems like it took several decades before you sat down, or was something that you were working on piecemeal all the way along, or there was a certain point where you just said, I've got to share this, save this for other people?
When I was a Marine, I didn't think about it.
That's your job.
When I retired, I took 4 days off and became a contractor for the next 23 years, supporting the Marine Corps. But it gave me time to think. And so I started thinking, and after about 10 years, I said, I didn't want to write about myself.
And you did. This book, what, 340 pages?
It's 460, I think. I don't know.
He's always referred in the third person, Lieutenant Fallon. Never does he say I or we did this. It was Lieutenant Fallon and Lieutenant Spolter, very detached on a personal level.
We want to share our mistakes and be honest and call them like it happened. We call them booby traps. Today, in Iraq and Afghanistan for the last 25 years, we call them IEDs. I taught Marines based on my booby trap experience. There was nothing new with an IED. Command detonated, tripwire detonated, remote control detonator. The electronics were a little more, but the fertilizer that made the explosion or the round that was a dud that it turned into.
So you think the lessons you learned are still applicable in this day and age of modern warfare?
Absolutely. Ultimately somebody, a Marine or a soldier's got to kick the door down. There's no such thing as no casualties. At the end of the day, the last 20 meters have got to be done by a human being.
I saw one picture of the book where you and your wife Sandy, his wife Sandy, where you stand up, Sandy, I'm sure, has contributed largely to this book. I went back, and I went actually back to the Arizona, Dodge City, and Alligator Lake, those places. And I know you went back to Camp Reasoner on Hill 327. Did you go back out into that area by 119?
Oh, absolutely, and there's a little thanks for saying that. I thank you very much, my lovely bride. She walked up Hill 119 on a very 90 degrees and 90 humidity. Twice. But there's, to prove it, there's a picture in the book of the two of us on summiting.
What were your thoughts? You stand up, you look back over Gunaway Island, you look over the Arizona Territory, Indian country as we call it.
Well, my real thought was, I didn't have any of this insight until I decided to be a historian and do the research. I wish I knew the information when I was a first lieutenant as commander of the Hill, because I probably would have done things a little bit different. I wouldn't have made mistakes.
You point out what a rich agricultural area it was. By the time I got there, it was not. It was blown to pieces and scarred by countless rockets and bombing attacks or whatever. But when I went back and I saw it as the rich, fertile area it has always been, I was just struck by the different set of emotions, seeing it at peace. Did you feel that way at all, looking over that area again?
Absolutely, and I would tell you that most Marines and soldiers said we never lost a battle or a firefight. I'm sure there's some place where we did. We got the shit kicked out of us. But we lost the war. And that was a political loss, in my view, and a mismatch between political objectives and military strategy. I would tell you we won the peace, Mike. You've been back. When their economy failed in '89, the communist government elected to go to a free market economy and make it a free trade zone. And it coincided with labor rates being high in North Korea, South Korea, and Japan. So all the big companies factoried up in South Vietnam, or the country of Vietnam today. It's one of the Asian tigers, and it's in the top 10 trade partners today with the United States. They love Americans. Jerry's been back. They teach English in school. There's a big age gap. There's some old timers, very few of them now, that remember the war, that are happy to talk about it with you. 35 and under, that they call it the American War. And they're taught in their history book, they won the French War. They won the American War. Most Americans don't realize 2 years later, China invaded down the Red River Valley with 8 divisions, and they won the China War 2 years after they defeated the Americans. They're nationalists first. Communist government controls them, no doubt about it. They love America. It's a matter of time. We will win.
Colonel Mike Fallon, thank you for sharing your thoughts, your observations, and lessons learned. We really appreciate it. Some questions?
All righty, we have a few questions here, and I'll start off because I like it. It's a bit of a different question. I was an infantry company commander, major, in the British Army, Cold War, 1982 to 2092. I never experienced war, nor did my soldiers. The question, how did your soldiers, how did your Marines react and deal with combat on their first contact?
The question is, how do the Marines react on their first combat? The Marine Corps training pipeline is super efficient. And it teaches you, and your fire team leader, that's the Lance Corporal in charge of the 3 other riflemen, he'll yell at you and tackle you and put you down as soon as fire's coming towards you, and he'll put you in the mud. You revert to what you're taught. And because of different experiences in a squad, you have some old timers and you have some F&Gs. The old timers will take over and yell and tell the new guys what to do. Not every Marine jumps up and charges. That doesn't happen very often. It happens when it needs to happen by an experienced Marine. Most of them revert, get behind the rice paddy dike, get behind the building, get behind the tank. Training kicks in. The Lance Corporal tells them, we're going around to the right. They react to their training, and they do very well.
Outstanding. Hey, this one's pretty good. It deals with today's modern technology. How is drone warfare changing the Marines' role with warfare, the boots on the ground, being an infantry and intelligence gatherer. What do you think about that, the drone warfare that's going on today?
Drone warfare is another technology that's been added to the battlefield. When the machine gun was developed, they said it would change warfare and be the end of trench warfare. Tank was developed to asymmetrically counter the machine gun. Aviation asymmetrically counters tanks. Drone warfare is a new asymmetric tool that gives you either intelligence or ordnance on you. As you can see in Ukraine today, they have developed countermeasures to the Soviet Iranian drones, and it's just another tool in the toolkit. So everything in combat is layered in a layer cake from small to large. So drones are the same way, from small to large. Small units will have an individual focused drone that'll help you look over the hill, which is a benefit. But ultimately, you gotta go over the hill. And that's gonna give you information. So it doesn't replace eyeballs. It doesn't replace intent, because camouflage, deception work against drones, just as it worked against people in balloons.
How much would it change your job on that hill if you had drones?
It would have, the IODs expanded our observation network. Drones would have expanded the observation network further, but if I had drones, my enemy would have drones. And so, in asymmetric warfare, we learn to counter the drone. Drones are a fact of life. The Marines, it's now on the table of equipment to the squad level today in the Marine Corps. So the Marine Corps has acknowledged it. They've been running hard. There are drones in every Marine rifle squad today.
But it's being used, that was my question, pardon me, it's being used to drop bombs, just not for observation. And I would think that would change how tactically Marines would approach, whatever.
Well, your goal, the comment was drones are being used to drop bombs the same way that helos are used to fire rockets and aircraft are used to drop bombs. In Afghanistan, when the Russians invaded, the first thing we did after talking to a few people was bring in the Stinger mission. The Stinger missiles changed the whole game because it pushed the Soviet aircraft to 10 grand. That allowed the infantry to start moving. So you would go after counter-drone warfare, and your sensors and your drones and other sensors' goal is to pick up the wave. And today in Ukraine, it's 400 to 500 drones a night that bomb coming in. It's called counter-drone, C-U-A-S. And so the Marine Corps has counter-drone systems in the state and unclassified level. They attack it electronically to try to take out its signal and interrupt its signal. They attack it kinetically with energy from a high energy beam, or they attack it finally with a Gatling gun on a ship. So on a Navy ship, there are still Gatling guns for the final defense. And it gets to the third layer defense. You hope it takes out all 540 coming at your ship. But the Navy ships in the Red Sea fighting the Houthis in Yemen been dealing with drones for the last 5 years and doing a hell of a good job. So it's cat and mouse, as we talked, Mike. It's you're going to be this way, or I'm going to be this way.
It's a big game. It's a serious game.
It's kind of like Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spy. It's all one up. And I think all of us here remember Mad Magazine. But why? Here you go. This is going to be the final question. When did you realize that Vietnam was done? And I'm going to presume that the question's asked. When was the Vietnam War for you done?
For me, I don't think it's done. I think of it every day. I think every veteran that went there parked Vietnam in the back of their head and got on with life. Now it's okay to talk about your Vietnam experience. When we came home, it wasn't. For the country, I mean, they won the American War, they moved on. They don't even talk about it unless you meet some of the old timers. And they love to sit down and drink tea with you and talk about their experiences. Now it's something we study in history. What we can really learn are the political military mismatch that occurred in the United States and try to prevent it in the next go around. And we haven't won one since Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So there's a lot to be said about the political military mismatch when we go somewhere, but that's another show. So thank you.
And I personally understand that. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. But hey, let me tell you something real quick. And I kind of forgot to mention this earlier. On 11 September, 9/11, but 11 September, we've got Dusty Baker from the Giants coming out here. And if you don't know, he's now a wine enthusiast and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's going to be a super fantastic event. If you haven't got your tickets for that, go on to our website and get them. And incidentally, or I should say coincidentally, there's going to be a dinner, the prime rib buffet, and all the stuff that Marines Memorial normally has with that sort of thing is going to be available also. It's a bit of a different price. My point, go online, check it out. It's going to be great. And there's not a whole lot of seats left for the dinner. So get on that. And I was joking with, I think it was Senior Chief. How many more people can we get in the audience for the event? Hey, this is like a 5-ton truck. We can always fit in one more. If you want to come to the event, but not for the dinner. All right, 16 September. That one's going to be really cool. It's more my era. It's going to be the Cold War Marines of Adak, Alaska. And if you don't know, Adak, Alaska is a little bitty island, really closer to Russia than it is to Alaska.
I've been there twice.
And a lot of us folks, we know about Adak. But they did a documentary. We're not going to screen the whole thing because I don't know about the general, but I don't want to sit for 2 hours watching a documentary. They're going to chop it up. It's going to be a great one. And they're going to show a bunch of clips and stuff from their documentary. And they're going to talk about what it was to be a young Marine. And by the way, young Marine, they were my age. Or now they're my age. And basically what they were doing, which was guarding nuclear weapons for the Navy. It's going to be great. Come out for that one. It's going to be a lot of the same thing that you do with these events. I'll have a little free wine and beer, help yourself, and come check that out. And lastly, on 2 October, we're going to have another Leading from the Front event with Lieutenant General Austin, who his call sign is Smash. That should be enough right there. Yes. But he's Lieutenant General. I didn't write down everything that, he's Lieutenant General, help me out. He's the Commanding General for
Combat Development and Integration.
Combat Development and Integration. It's a Quantico thing. But I'll tell you what, you want to know what's going on from a big level, you need to come right back out here and tell your friends to come out here because it's going to be really good to check this out. And I myself are going to have some questions on what's going on with today's Marine Corps from a tactical, or actually from a strategic level, but from a tactical level. So that being said, Colonel Fallon's going to sell some books, and I'll leave you with this. I read the book. Of course, I read every book for all these authors, and this one's outstanding because those who fail to repeat history are doomed, fail to observe history are doomed to repeat it. Can't believe I screwed that up. But hey, this is a really great book, and you guys really need to check this out. This is a good one. So that being said, he's going to put some books over here. I'm going to slap some 1960s music on because I like it. And you know what? John, let's keep it open for just a few minutes more, and grab a glass of wine, buy a book, talk with Colonel Fallon.
Master Petty Sergeant Mike Saray, that was a great.
Okay, hey, you know what? And he's right. Give it up for Mike Saray. Now, I'm sure that most organizations have to pay for this, but Mike Saray does this for us pro bono, and I can't appreciate him enough for doing this. And one more time for Mike Saray. Ladies and gentlemen,